Let's not talk about penalties if we're going to talk about the final because Vancouver's a little bit sore on that still. Sorry, Ryan Gauld, our working class MVP. It was a bit of a rough go against LAFC. Max Crepeau and his
Great
villain
save.
arc. You love to see it from a neutral perspective. You hate to see it if you are Vancouver Whitecaps. That was decision day, of course, at the weekend. Ryan had been 6 for 6, by the way, in penalties this season, but he gets stopped by Crepeau, he gets stopped by the woodwork, and now Gareth Wheeler, the club that you have said on multiple occasions has been the nemesis of Vancouver Whitecaps, and it continues to play out on the pitch, is the side that Vancouver has to meet as they finish outside of the top four and have to deal with LAFC on the road. At least it's our best of three series. That's a highlight. We'll get your thoughts again because you might have called this one for LAFC. But let's hear about Vanni Sartini, fresh off a contract extension and the defeat.
I think we're gonna see at least two fantastic battles in the next two games. Also because even if we were playing very well, their quality at the end, you see, boom, 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 they almost scored. Yohei made a great save because what this team has, it's because of the quality of their speed. The player is so fast. The guy, what's his name, Oliveira, Buanga, they can create a chance from nothing. And that's what they did at the end, and they almost won the game. So that's a big, I would say, thing that we need to focus because we need to be quote unquote perfect on both end of the game if we want to qualify. Because if we want to qualify, we need to win a game in Los Angeles, and it's gonna be quite hard, I would say.
I think that's a fair assessment. I also love the t-shirt that says "Sing, Drink, Victory." Heck yes to that t-shirt. I'm all on board that train. But quite hard to get the win in LA, Gareth. And as they proved on the weekend, quite hard to get past this really star-studded side, easy for me to say, at BC Place. Is this a bad matchup for the Whitecaps?
Yes, it is. I'll get into that in a moment. First off, good to see a big crowd come out, biggest of the season, and the final game of the year. It took until the final game when Vancouver's kind of responded. That will translate through a playoff game at home as well. I hope that we can put to get bed this Ryan Gauld MVP talk, not because he missed those two penalties, it's because he played for the sixth place team in the Western Conference. Like the MVP has got to be on the top two or three teams in the league. Like no one voted for Gauld. Like it's a great campaign. Well done for Vancouver to add some character to it, but Gauld was never the MVP, and I just can't see him getting any votes. As for LAFC, Vancouver has played LA much more competitively in recent games, but going to LA, it's been a nightmare. They concede every game in LA. In recent meetings, they've conceded 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 6, 6, 2. Like they can't come anywhere close to touching this team when they're playing on grass. And over a best of three, I mean, if it goes to three, like two of those games are going to be away from home where LA has all kinds of difficulty. LA stalled a little bit this season because they played a ton of games. Campione's Cup final. Obviously, they're playing the U.S. Open Cup. I think they only made the quarterfinal in that one. In Leagues Cup, I think they made it to the 32 or 16. They were in another tournament as well. Like they played so much football this year that Steve Trundle, their manager, said, like, look, if the Champions League, they lost in the final. And he said after that, he's like, with all of these games and all these competitions, this is why MLS roster rules need to change because we just simply don't have enough quality top reinforcements to go out and try to be competitive in each and every one of them. And he was right to a certain degree. And I do think it affected their form a little bit. But come playoff time, Buanga, the Golden Boot winner, Vela, Oliveira, Tillman, Sanchez in the midfield, like, Acosta is back in and about the team. Like they are absolutely loaded. And I think this Whitecaps team is very good, by the way. I think that they should have finished probably in the top half of the Western Conference, but they didn't. And for me, they're playing the toughest competitor that they could face in the first round by virtue of it. It's just a difficult one for Vancouver. Perhaps it can come together. They've had a great season. They've been playing some really good football, the Vancouver Whitecaps, but this matchup, I just don't think it's a great one for them.
Oliver Platt.
I actually don't agree. I think this is one of the more favorable matchups that they could have got based on the potential opponents. I would rather play LAFC at this stage. I may not have said this earlier this season, but right now I'd rather play them than Seattle or Houston. And Wills is right. They have a tough record on the road there. And like Sartini said, they're going to need to win one. But they did win the last one. They conceded 2, but they scored 3. And they beat LAFC away from home the last time they played. I think it goes much deeper than that, though. LAFC, Wills is right, have played a lot of games. Since the League's Cup, they have 4 wins, 3 draws, 4 losses. Their only wins are against the LA Galaxy, Austin, Minnesota, and Colorado, who are the bottom 4 teams in the Western Conference. In 6 of the other 7 games, they've either failed to score or they've conceded multiple goals. That would have been 7 of 7 if Ryan Gold had scored just one of those penalties on the weekends. Like, this is not a team down the stretch that has looked quite as good as they have been at the peak of their powers in the Champions League and earlier on this season. So I think when you compare the way they've been playing in the past couple of months to the way Seattle has been playing, they're on an unbeaten run. Houston has been very good, at least on form. And I recognize there's tremendous quality in the LAFC team, and maybe they spring back to life and to full potential as the playoffs start. But based on form right now, I think there's upset potential here, and I don't think the Whitecaps will mind their chances.
Oliver Platt calling for the upset is very exciting. You know who would be thrilled with that? It would be Benny Sartini. And we are elated at One Soccer and as a part of the media infrastructure in this country because we get to deal with that fantastic man for a little while longer after his extension. Look, there's still lots to be done, Ollie, in the playoffs, but with the 2-year deal now inked from Vanny's perspective, what do you make of the now, next year, the future for the Whitecaps, and what Vanny Sartini has been able to do with this club?
All I have to say on this is that it's deserved. They're in the playoffs. I think they're going to have a good chance in the playoffs. They probably should have finished higher if you look at their underlying numbers. I think it suggests that they're maybe better than their position and certainly not worse. And Vanni Sartini deserves a ton of credit because there were a lot of people that doubted him, and I will happily eat humble pie and count myself among those. You know,
Delicious.
You go back to the start of the year, last season, certainly, there were people really questioning how long he would last in Vancouver, whether it was quite trending in the right direction enough or was going to turn around enough. And it absolutely has done. This is the best the Whitecaps have been in a long, long time, maybe ever in their MLS era. And there's a lot to be excited about, I think, with this team, with Vanni Sartini at the helm. He's also just a very, very good person in my experiences as well. And you like to see people like that succeed. So all credit to him.
Can we make it official? Vanni Sartini's off the hot seat. Yes. Not on the hot seat anymore. That's because he had to earn it, because Vancouver Whitecaps could have very easily gone in a different direction, but Vanny forced their hand, not only based upon results, vibe, personality, mindset, the ability to work well with others. All of these things also come to the table. Vancouver, based upon the club and their most recent standing, needed that jolt of energy, needed some persona, needed some attitude, some je ne sais quoi. And this guy's brought all of that and more to the table. He's someone that you want to get behind, you want to root for. I think that that some of the fans have fed off it, the players are feeding off it, and let the good times roll. And we'll see how far he can take this. I think Axel Schuster deserves a lot of credit. He's stuck with this manager. He's been patient with him, and he's gone out and built a squad where they are too deep, literally at every position now. And they're built to play a certain way, a certain formation, and having that collective identity can take you further, than maybe some would have originally prognosticated. So good on him. I think that it's only up from here. I think that Vancouver's still not done. Although they're too deep at every position, I still think they can strengthen in certain positions as well. And Sartini is going to be the person to oversee, this team trying to make this jump from a good, very good team to potentially a contender and one of the top teams in Major League Soccer. So thrilled for Sartini. I want to see who he gets on stage and sings with next. It was Nickelback first. Who's next on the docket? Let's go. I'm thinking off-season concert tour, hops on a bus, travels the country, has some small gigs. I can see this happening. And we're all thrilled for Vanni Sartini. Well done.
Well, Gareth, there's a simple answer to that, and that's Tyler Shaw of Richmond, British Columbia, who will also be headlining the CPL final. He does have a playoff.
He's going to be in LA.
That was my attempt at getting in a plug for the electric stage, which I'm so happy about. Jimmy Brennan and I may not make it to the booth in time. We might just be raving on the pitch with Tyler Shaw, but that's neither here nor there. We're going to go from west to east, and this year it was quite simple. West was best and the East was least in terms of Canadian MLS sides. Decision day was also a huge one, Oliver Platt, for CF Montreal, but they fall to Columbus by 2-1. You totally blew your TFC predictions during our Tony But top picks, but I think you got this one right with Wilfred Nancy and company coming in. And
Orlando had like their second or third team playing until they put on McGuire. Anyways, go ahead.
No, we will have time to get to that later.
Our Tony Bet predictions.
I will assure you we have
losing
time
to Orlando's third team
at the end of the show. Ollie, so CF Montreal. This is one where there's a few things that we know. They eventually got really nice kit, not just that gray marble fiasco. They have a lot of really good, passionate support. They have a side that underachieved, but was also not helped by the front office in terms of their sell-offs and not really filling those holes in. Where do you want to go here? Because this seems like a dense white pages report of what we need to do about CF Montreal.
Yeah, well, that's the tricky thing about answering is I'm not sure where to start. It's not all bad in Montreal. Like I do think, as much as it made this season really difficult, like the season they had last year, the promotion of Wilfred Nancy as head coach, the recruitment of Mihailovic, of Johnston, bringing Kone through, like that was a really, really impressive team and a really impressive accomplishment. I think from a purely footballing perspective of the team they put together and the levels that some of those players have now gone on to, the potential they had. So it's not all bad, and it certainly can't be compared to Toronto FC in that regard. But despite that, and despite the fact that they were obviously much closer to making the playoffs than CFC, it feels like the disconnect between the supporters and the club is like just as great as it is in Toronto, which is pretty shocking to say, given, we'll get on to TFC and the season they've had, or seasons they've had at this point. So I think as much as, if you see if Montreal, as much as you want to kind of say, well, we do all these things quite well, actually, and defend your record a little bit, you have to be honest and you have to front up to the fact that there's been a lot of things on and off the pitch that have led to this situation they're in now, where there seems to be so much turmoil, again, between the core supporters of the club and the way they feel about the club in the future. And maybe there's even less optimism about the future in Montreal right now than there is in Toronto. There's a lot to get into there. I think we need an entire show to do it in terms of how you kind of rectify that and what those things are. But they're in a tough spot. And I think they've got real work to do this offseason to kind of convince their supporters that this is still a team that's ambitious, still a team that wants to win, that wants to compete with the best in MLS. And this year, in that regards, although I think a step backwards on the pitch was inevitable given the players they lost and the coach they lost, I think it's been a step back in other ways as well that are maybe more worrying.
Couple gut punches from that video in that Sanusi Ibrahim opened the scoring and Montreal led the match, but then the match winner, you see Rudy Camacho jogging in to join the celebratory huddle and the festivities there. That probably stung for Montreal supporters. Gareth, your take on the situation in La Belle Province?
Yeah, I mean, it was the last kick of the ball. Penalty, Tolkien, New York Red Bulls beat Nashville, and Montreal find themselves on the outside looking in. But look, if you're fighting, competing to play in the 8-9 game,
yeah.
Like they had the 20th or 21st best record in Major League Soccer, and that in most leagues around the world is relegation. The fact that there's 29 teams and there's worse teams, that's fine. They just need to look at themselves in the mirror. And Ollie's right. Like CF Montreal are doing some things really well. They're bringing through some really good young players and giving Canadian players a chance. Jonathan Sirois, excellent season, not on him. Saliba in central midfield, a lot of excitement there. The start of the season was porous because they went on and sold upwards of $20 million worth of player in the offseason and didn't replace them. So they started the season horribly under a new manager who just wasn't well enough equipped to go out and be competitive. They found their groove. There was some consistency with some young players doing well in the middle. And at the end of the season, they stunk as well. It's just their top goal scorer had 5 goals, and it was a central midfielder in Mathieu Choinière. Like, this was a team that we should remind people finished second place in the Eastern Conference last year. And to me, they just let their standards drop. The second smallest payroll in all of Major League Soccer. And you just need to wonder how committed the club are to providing this team or giving them a chance to have sustained success. I think operating the way they do, they can't have success in small windows or pockets because they develop really well and they're finding some good young players. And I think they play a system. I think they, despite all the negativity around them, I think they got their manager right. Once again, they continue to get a good manager, but you can't just ask that manager to overachieve that much all the time. Like, this is the reason why Wilfred Nancy went on to a place where they're doing both things in Columbus. They're developing as well as providing some top players for their manager and the first team level to go on and have success. That's the reason why Columbus just won an MLS Cup a few years back. How committed are CF Montreal if you're not going to spend to recruit top players? Like, they were playing without a DP this year. Like, Wanyama barely even played. They didn't bring, they spend money on young players, but it doesn't equate to immediate or guaranteed success when you don't bring in top players. And not saying that they need to go out and bring in like the top upper echelon designated players, but you need to add quality to the team, especially in areas of the attack, or it's simply going to be fruitless. And that's where I think the frustration comes to. And that's why I think their issues are extremely complex here. Because ownership, management need to show that they're willing to invest in the club to keep up with the unprecedented growth across Major League Soccer in terms of what clubs and most clubs are willing to spend. Like Orlando City this year, that's the exception and not the rule. And you need to spend smart, but you certainly need to spend. And when you have $20 million going out and a manager going out and you simply don't replace it with even any significant value, you just wonder what the motivation, how much they want to stomach, and what the future of this club actually has in store. I think there's significant concerns here. If you don't spend, at least to a middle range level of Major League Soccer, you're going to be part of the trailing pack. And that's unfortunately where CF Montreal finds themselves right now.
Ollie, I gave you the first word on the end of the season, but I'd like you to weigh in, if you'd like, here on what this offseason might look like for the Saputos and their club.
Well, I think they obviously have to address, a number of key positions in the team. But like, again, when we talk about spending here and showing a bit more ambition, like, I don't know, it's easy to compare to like the best run clubs in the league and everyone wants to be like them. But like Philadelphia, Cincinnati, they're not going and signing like $10 million players with massive names and massive profiles. Like, they're signing undervalued players, good players coming in from sometimes secondary leagues in Europe or other places around the world. But they're always the right fit, right? Like, they always have a clear idea of how they want to play, where the player fits, he's the right profile. Like, I think that is just kind of the bar that you need to meet, not in terms of necessarily being immediately as successful as those clubs, but the general level of ambition and intent you need to show to build a competitive team in this league. I think that's all kind of you want to see if you're a CF Montreal fan. It doesn't need to be bring back Didier Drogba and bring in a Carlos Vela as well. Exactly, yeah. Just showing a willingness on day one and not kind of papering over the cracks as the season goes on, to have a roster that's ready and competitive at the start of the season, which they didn't this year.
Yeah, definitely a roller coaster of emotions for the supporters in Montreal this season, who deserve better. Let's be honest. They're a fantastic group that constantly supports this team, and they were disappointed by the lack of newcomers after the wholesale changes at the end of 2022.
Second place. They're that, and I get that they had to sell on those
fall
players,
from grace,
but
unfortunate.
Where's that next wave? Like, there needs to be kind of a plan. Like if we lose this, then this is where we're
Right.
going after. These are what teams like Columbus do better than anyone else in this league. That planning for the future, and they do in terms of young players, but the recruitment this year just a million miles off it.
And the future is now for CF Montreal. So we'll see how this offseason transpires for the club. Just about, 550 kilometers away from Toronto FC, which is our next topic, gentlemen. And it's a topic of consternation because, woof, is there a lot to sink our teeth, that's already a plural word, into. 2-0, John Herdman's first match as gaffer on the touchline ends in defeat. And, well, it was the worst season in franchise history. Let's not color around the edges or beat around the bush here. It was a disaster in Toronto for TFC in 2023 for a litany of reasons. And Oliver Platt, I'm going to give you the first word on this. How would you like to summarize this? I'm not even going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you a blank canvas, Picasso, and a brush. I've already dipped it in a paint for you, and I just want you to go to work.
I mean, I think you could go one step further. Worst season in MLS history, given the context of how much they spent and the expectations at the start of the year. It's hard to think of a worse one. Certainly, whether you believe that or not, it's the kind of season at pretty much any club with real expectations and standards would result in a total cleaning of house on and off the pitch. And the interesting thing about Toronto FC is that hasn't really happened yet. And that's the big question going into the offseason, is to what extent is that going to happen, particularly when it comes, obviously, to Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi. Can that happen based on the likely outcome of needing to pay them off several $1 million, if not more than that, in order to get them to go and play somewhere else? So, that's the big question going into this offseason is how easy or how difficult is it going to be to undo the damage of just an absolutely disastrous year.
Gareth, I know you and I are both waiting for One Soccer to do the same for us. Just pay us millions of dollars to take a long, well-deserved vacation, you and I, buddy.
Nice knowing you.
We're off to Cardiff. You'll never see us again.
I'll go to the north, but yeah, fair point.
Fair enough.
The word that I would describe, I won't use a swear word, so I'll just call it a circus. It's one thing when you're bad, but when you're dysfunctional, it makes it that much worse. The Italians need to go. There's no debate about it. Like watching Insigne not put in an effort to track back or defend, and Bernardeschi making the same move over and over again, not having an assist in open play all season long. You're a $6 million player. How does that happen? And all the off-field stuff. I mean, but what do? I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs in hockey had this thing where they put players on Robida Island and they just go away. This island's very expensive for a club. I just don't think that can afford it because they're still paying off managers. Sounds like the things have tightened in terms of budget in and around the club. So what do? It's a good question, but it's quite clear who brought in those players, but the former manager also brought in players like Diamande. Diamande was on this team this year. What? Like there was a bunch of signings. If you go across the entire Toronto FC squad, you're like, well, that player is making way too much money. And you'll say that for just about every player, bar maybe two on the team who would be deemed serviceable. That is a massive problem. They brought in a center back, Matt Hedges, that didn't want to be there. You brought in a goalkeeper. I kept on saying this over the years, as if the two goalkeepers they had in Bono and Westberg were the problem to begin with. And you go in and sign an exceptionally expensive center midfield when you needed more help elsewhere. They turned assets. They brought in assets that depreciated. Then they got even worse because then you got rid of them and you brought in players who had less value than them. There are significant problems top to bottom here. I don't know what John Herdman does. Like, how much can they chop? Like, this is a complete squad rebuild. I repeat, a complete squad rebuild. He's brought in his own staff. It's turned over behind the scenes. There's not much further that it can cut. It's about getting good players, proper players on adequate salaries that reflect their ability and what's required from the team. And that is a job that I'm not sure if they can do in 1, 2 windows, 3 windows, probably 3 windows at the minimum. And that all depends what you do with Insigne and Bernardeschi. So, look, Herdman clearly brings excitement on the touchline. I think that he said some of the right things. I mean, what else is he supposed to say? But deep down, I think that this is the reason why he started coaching on the last game of the season rather than before, because he just knows that this squad, there's not much that he wants to do with them. Quite frankly, need to get in their own players and their own people, and this is going to take quite some time. The advantage potentially that they have is that there's an ownership group that has spent lots of money in the past. Are they willing to spend their way out of these problems? If they are, maybe some of these issues can be mitigated to a certain degree. If they're not, I just don't think that the suffering is over.
Yeah, luckily for the rest of MLS and for TFC supporters, the rubbernecking is over. No more are we going, what's going on? What's going on at BMO Field? Because it's not been great. And I'm going to quickly go through a few numbers from, as I've already discussed on this show, one of my favorite people in the TFC Live universe. It's like the MCU, but a little bit more sarcastic at the minute. And that is Martin Bailey, who compiled a nice list of franchise and MLS records. And unlike a certain Taylor Twellman, I'm going to attribute Martin Bailey for these numbers. Let's start with the MLS records. The MLS records, league-wide in 2023. First club to spend $30 million in guaranteed compensation, and they were abysmal. First non-expansion club to finish bottom 2 for 3 straight seasons. Worst goal for average in all competitions, 0.73. Worst points per game in all competitions, 0.59. Worst goal differential in all competitions, -40. I could go on because Martin did a really good job compiling that list, but we do not have time to go on other than to say good riddance to this season, and hopefully things can change this offseason.
I'll give the fans a lot of credit because they still showed up in quite decent numbers over the course of the year. But the thing that has to change is you're paying good money to go out
good money
and support this team, and seeing those types of performances after what the promises were. That's what makes it cut a little deeper. I think that most fan base is based on a North American sport. If you're bad over a prolonged period of time, it requires a little bit of a rebuild. The Maple Leafs went through it. Like, big clubs go through different types of poor patches here, but it's the fact that they didn't go through that rebuild. They tried to get spend a lot, resolve these issues very quickly, and prove that that cannot be accomplished that way. So again, this may take some time.
Yeah, I always use my personal litmus test as a selfish human being as I am. My high school football coach, and one of the best people I've ever known. His name's Graham Collins. He's from Kingston, Ontario, and he takes the long car ride and GO train for just about every single TFC match, and it ended in heartbreak on several times. So for no other reason than for Mr. Collins and his happiness, and Ethan and Julia, his lovely little ones who want to believe in the future. Let's sort this out, TFC, shall we? There is some work to be done. Tip of the cap to Michael Bradley. Sorry your retirement / send-off match ended so poorly, but congratulations on a wonderful career. I have not had the chance to say it. I know obviously there was a lot said on Thursday, but I'll add my name to that ring there. And good luck in Norway with your coaching gig with your father. And we can bookend TFC.
One quick note on that.
Of course,
Bradley, I think that people around the team and fans got to say their goodbyes, and it's entirely appreciated what he did over his career. I wonder if the script would have been different if his father wasn't named as manager. And it has nothing to do with Bob Bradley's leadership abilities or his ability to manage. But when things went sideways and Michael's father, Bob, went out, a player that was at a club for just about a decade has now left on a sour note. And that is a big part of that. And I think that this is a little bit of a cautionary tale about, potentially situations being too close for comfort, because when they don't go to plan, I think the fallout kind of happens as it did, and it hasn't ended on a great note. And I think that's rather unfortunate, that it did play out that way.
Yeah, nature of the beast, right? To be the coach, and you understand that there's going to be criticism, but I can't imagine how comfortable that must have been for Michael to come into work every day or to talk to anyone around the infrastructure of TSC, being like, your dad should be fired, your dad should be kicked out of the country, and he should never return. Every single day until it finally happened. It's a tough situation, and hopefully they have some greener pastures in Norway.